Hello.
Good morning.
Happy
Saturday.
Saturday. Yeah.
This is
Easter Saturday.
It is Easter Saturday. It's like quiet waiting Saturday.
Yeah.
The world was silent Saturday. Silent Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not feeling so happy, honestly.
Yeah, we had an emotional Good Friday service, and
I
then
did.
kind of have this, I don't want to say a letdown, but it's like this emotional waiting of,
It's a lull.
it is.
It's a lull.
But I think it's important for us to feel it. I mean, that is actually what happened.
Mm-hmm.
All of the disciples were sitting there wondering what happened, like what now, where do we go? They were hiding, they were afraid for their lives, they were
Mm-hmm.
sad and silent and confused and lost. And I think that it's important, especially as our church has gone through lament, for us to sit
In that.
in our proverbial sackcloth and ashes, awaiting.
Yep. Yeah. We're back this Saturday. It's been a while. It's been a few Saturdays since we've made a video, and it's not because we've forgotten you. It's not because we've forgotten to make videos. But we haven't had any questions. We haven't had any questions to respond to. Seems that
The Bible is completely understandable and nobody has questions about anything.
the Joshua has been super easy to understand as we went through Joshua, as we finished up Exodus, that it was just cake. And, you know, honestly, mostly it was talking about the breaking up of the different lands and things. And maybe that was super easy to understand and people didn't have questions about it. I know I did have one really good conversation with one person about how Joshua said, remember how God brought us out of Egypt. You saw, you knew about how God did this. And we had a really good conversation about how this generation that was entering into the promised land, they were the generation that, right, God had, the generation that had actually seen all of what God had done in Egypt had died in the wilderness. So this generation, they weren't there. So she had talked to me about, like, he's saying, remember when God did this, you saw that God did this. And she was like, well, no, they didn't. And we talked about how when Joshua's using that language, he's really talking about the oral tradition. This was really passed down. With the Hebrew people. The oral tradition was really strong. Stories were passed down from generation to generation. The oral tradition of understanding what happened with your ancestors was very strong among the people of Israel. And so when he talks about remember this, they really did know what happened.
Well, and he's using God's own words.
Mm-hmm.
So as God spoke to Moses, as God spoke to Joshua, continually repeating those words. Remember that I brought you out. Remember how I brought you out. Remember when I brought you out. So it's continually reiterated from the Lord himself to his people. Don't forget what I did for you. And so passing down that actual language that they received from God to the next generation to make sure that we do all this to remember what he did.
Right. And so while they may not have been
firsthand observers
or old enough to really have seen it with their own eyes, or to have, have the actual memory in their own brains, they have the stories passed down from their parents, their grandparents. Yep. They have the oral tradition given to them by God, and God is telling them to not forget what they have been told, to not forget what they know has happened, and to keep that with them. And for that generation that entered the promised land, they did remember. And there's actually at the end of Joshua, as the tribe of Gad and, oh gosh, I'm gonna mess it up now, Reuben, right? It's Reuben. Oh man, sometimes I get the tribes mixed up and I get confused. It's the half tribe of Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben that are on the other side.
Yes.
I don't know why I was just blanking on that, but as they're going back over, they set up an altar, and the whole tribe of Israel gets all upset because they think they're setting up an altar to make sacrifices on. They think that they're breaking God's law to make sacrifices and to sacrifice in a way that is not what God ordained. And so they think they've already started to forget what God told them to do in the way that God told them to do it. And so they're like ready to like go out and attack them. They're ready to go to war because they're like, no, God said to remember and do things his way. You're not going to do this. You're not going to immediately defy him. And so they're ready to go to arms against their brothers, right? Because they're taking seriously what God says. And then they get over there and the leaders of the tribes are like, no, we're setting up a memorial. We're not sacrificing animals here. We're just setting up a memorial so that our children can remember, so that when they see this, they can, if they start to forget because they're not in the promised land, because we were told that we could set up here, so that if they start to forget, that we can point to this and say, no, remember.
And they did that a lot. Like when big things happened throughout the Old Testament, you'll see they used the word altar. They built an altar. They built an altar to memorialize covenants, treaties, relationships. That was just one of the things that they did. It was a physical reminder of something bigger that was going on, so that they could point to that. So it was like a sign. It was
but it wasn't the same as an altar that they would sacrifice on. There were different types of altars, and so there was confusion because they thought they were setting up a sacrificial altar,
but they weren't.
And they were like, no, we're not. We promise we're not doing that. And so then it was like, oh, okay, you're not, then we're good. And then they all went about their way peacefully.
Yep.
But it was kind of interesting because as we get into Judges, what we're going to see is that this generation remembered. They remembered what happened in Egypt. They remembered God's promises. They remembered what God had done, and they remembered his commands.
And
then we see that as that generation dies,
almost immediately start intermarrying with the peoples that they were supposed to have driven out. And that's just a slippery old slope into crazy.
Yeah, that when that generation passes on, what they did not do is do a great job of making sure that the next generation remembered.
Was well informed.
And that's where Judges comes in, and we see that generation after generation, they don't remember.
Further and further and further away, which, to me, now that you say that, is just, how good of a job are we doing teaching our children and raising them up in the ways of the Lord, versus how do we help them know Jesus but still fit into the world, which is a really slippery slope.
It is.
So my observation as I was going back through Judges is great. I remember having a conversation with Marcus years ago. He's like, Mom, that's where the juicy stuff starts. And I just thought it was funny. He was like 10. That's where the juicy stuff starts, which I thought was pretty funny. But
there's a lot of juicy stuff.
There's a lot of juicy stuff in Judges.
There is.
But as I was reading back through, and it was like, it's literally in Judges 1 when Judah and Simeon are, pairing up to go in and conquer. And I'm reading through the cities that they're conquering, and one of the cities, and then they went in to conquer Jerusalem. I'm like, wait, what? And it stopped me for a second, because in my brain, I just always associated Jerusalem with Israel. Mm-hmm. Not that it was an actual city that existed before they came into the Promised Land. It wasn't the Las Vegas of the Middle East, where they're like, oh, there's a desert, let's build a city in the middle. Or like, we're in Arizona, Phoenix, there's a desert with no water, let's build a city. It wasn't just, human hubris that's like, oh, we can conquer this. It already existed. The Canaanites built it, and the Jebusites built it, and we didn't actually the Israelites didn't fully conquer it until King David came, and then he made it the center of Israel. But that was kind of like, oh, wait a second, it was not something that they just created for the Lord. It was something that they conquered and then sort of didn't fully conquer until David. But
during King David's reign, God told him to establish it as the center of worship.
So, I was like, oh, even us have studied scripture for years, go back, read through it, and we're like, huh. So I know there's questions out there, guys, because even we have questions.
Mm-hmm. And I know that there are some people that you might be, this is one of the things that we want to encourage you with. You might have, we know that as you go through with plans like this, like you might miss days, you might get behind on things. That's okay, right? It's okay if you miss days or if you are behind on things. Please just keep going. Don't give up.
And don't feel like you have
Don't-
to catch up, because that can be kind of
Right.
overwhelming too. If you're a
Yeah.
week behind, pick up on the current day and move forward. Don't feel like you have to catch up with everybody else. Just
It's-
pick up where you dropped and go.
Yeah, it's really okay. Just keep going. And ask questions where you're at. And it's okay if it's not in the exact spot that we're at. It's okay if you're behind. It's okay if you
Have
are
read
asking
ahead.
questions at a different, yeah, it's okay if you've read ahead. Ask questions where you're at, but please stay in scripture and ask the questions that you have, and don't feel like, it's a silly question or anything like that, because there are probably other people that have the same questions.
Absolutely.
The important thing is stay in the word and dive in.
You guys have a great rest of the week, and we'll
See you
talk to you on
tomorrow.
Saturday. Oh, well, we'll see you tomorrow.
Ho-
But
yeah,
we'll talk to you on
hopefully
Saturday.
we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.